All right, people, I'm back, and this is another NBA video. It's gonna be the Boston Celtics versus the Phoenix Suns, 1970s slash 1980s versus the 1990s slash 2000s. Larry Bird, aka the Larry Legend, versus Steve Nash. Now, this is another video of guard versus guard, but it's with two white guys. And I want nobody to be thinking I'm racist or biased or any mere shape or form whatsoever. I don't want no one to go in the comment section and go, you're talking about all these other black basketball players. There's some great white players. You know, there's John Stockton. I haven't even done nothing with John Stockton from the Utah Jazz. So I might greatly compare him to somebody like J.J. Redick or somebody of that level. But here I wanted to do Larry Bird and Steve Nash because there is a lot of comparisons between these two legends of basketball. So let's get to it, shall we? Now, Larry Bird played high school basketball and then he played college basketball, and that's when the legend of Larry Legend began in college basketball. He played for a small school in Indiana called Indiana. And out east, there was a guy named Irvin Johnson, who would later get the nickname Irvin Magic Johnson, who played for Michigan. And these two guys would clash like for 2 to 3 years in college basketball. These two guys were rivals, contenders. They would clash against each other. And the reason why they were clashing was because they were trying to win a championship for their school. Ultimately, in the championship game, we all know who won the championship game, of course. Magic, just had to win the championship, and Larry, heartbroken and disappointed, never got the chance to win a title because Magic won one. And sometime later in the 70s, he got drafted in the NBA to the Boston Celtics, and Irvin, whose nickname was Magic, got drafted to the Los Angeles Lakers sometime after that. And again, these two find themselves as rivals, arch nemesis, if you will. The Batman versus Joker, Captain America versus Red Skull, the Ninja Turtles versus Shredder. There were rivals like that on that high, insane, competitive level. And at this time, Larry took this team to a place it hadn't been to in a while. They would go on a tear of 20 to 25 games. Then first it was they won 10 games, 15 games, 20 games, 30, 40 games, 50 games. The Boston Celtics were winning basketball games. They were beating teams. They were making the playoffs. They would win playoff games. They would win playoff series. All because of one person, Larry Bird. The way this guy would shoot the basketball was insane. It didn't matter if he was up close to the basket, 5 to 10 feet. He could be 20 feet away from the basket, and the guy would just drill threes like nobody's business. It didn't matter if you put him on the right side of the court, the left side of the court, the top of the key, the three-point line, above the three-point line. He would just hit threes from anywhere. And he always finished the basketball games by scoring 25 to 35 points a game. And on a great high note career, he could drop 40 to 45 points on your ass. And the way he would do this was so classy. I mean, he had a nice little crossover. He was tall. He was like maybe 6'1", 6'2", maybe 220 pounds. And the guy could move fast for his height. In fact, if he wanted to, he could dunk the ball just a little bit. And he was a good shot blocker, good rebounder, but his skill was known for hitting three-pointers. And no matter how big of a lead you could get on the Celtics, somehow, some way, he come back and close the gap in the lead and tie up the score and then pass you. And he would do this consistently. Every quarter, he would score 20 points in every quarter. And he would frustrate the hell out of defenders. Guys would defend him, and not knowing that he could score all these points, these guys would be confused when the game was over, trying to figure out how do you stop a Larry Bird. That same year, in 1980, Magic took the team to a place it had been to, the NBA Finals. That year, Magic won an NBA championship, but in 1981, it was time for Larry Legend to live up to that name, and he did, as they beat the Atlanta Hawks, as they made their way into the finals and knocked off a Houston Rockets team and won a championship. And Larry had won his first one. Then we know 1982-1983 NBA season, we would get a chance to see the Celtics and the Lakers in the NBA Finals back-to-back. Magic won his second title. Larry come back. Larry win his second championship. Now they were 2 championships apiece. And then it happened. Magic couldn't resist. It was the 1984-1985 NBA season. Magic won a third NBA championship. And then Larry couldn't help himself. We got to the 1986 NBA playoffs. And again, Larry showed why he was Larry Legend, as he took out the 76ers, took out the Detroit Pistons, did away with the New York Knicks. And then, of course, let's not forget, he would have his best game to date. He would take on a young, up-and-coming rookie Michael Jordan that dropped a tier of 50-plus points. Something that hadn't been done in a basketball game as a rookie. And Larry kept his composure. Most veteran players at this point would be terrified to see a guy just keep hitting shot after shot. But Larry couldn't stop Michael Jordan, but Larry knew that he could stop the team of the Bulls, and he did. And they eliminated the Chicago Bulls in 6 games. As he went to the commentary and said, unbelievable game. I mean, this Michael Jordan, he's going to be something in the future. And when asked comment, do you think he could surpass you in Magic? He said maybe somewhere in the future, we'll see. He didn't exactly say yes or no. He just said we'll see if he can do that or not. And he goes back and he wins his third NBA championship in 1986. And of course the Lakers lose, and we get to the 1987-1988 NBA season. Larry hurts his back. And when he hurts his back, it's the beginning of the end for the Boston Celtics, as Magic won a 4th NBA championship and then turn around and beat Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons in the 1988 NBA Finals. We hear that classic line from Magic, back-to-back. He wins back-to-back to win 5 titles, while Larry's only stuck at 3. By the time we reached the 1989-1990 NBA season, they were hit with injuries. Kevin McHale was hurt. Larry Bird was hurt. At that point, they had Dennis Rodman, and he helped knock off the Boston Celtics in 5 games. And they advanced to the NBA playoffs and the NBA Finals to beat the Lakers in the championship. And by 1990-1991 NBA season, we saw a Larry Bird that moved slow. He couldn't get off the court as much. There were days where he missed games. He sat the bench. And then there were days where he played games, but he couldn't play in 4 quarters. He had to play 20 minutes and then come out of the game because that's how bad his back was. Of course, at this time, we were headed to 1992, where we had the return of the Olympics. And him and Magic would have a chance to play together on the Olympics, where he would win an Olympic gold medal. And finally, we saw the closing of his career as he just retired because his back was messed up. And we saw there that the Celtics had ended their NBA season knowing that they have 16 championships, and that the reason why they got up to 16 championships because Larry Bird won them 3 championships. I mean, that was a great team that they had. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, I forget the other players, but there were some great players on that team. And these guys would go to the finals every single year in the late 70s and the 80s and would battle back and forth. A lot of people underestimated Larry Bird. One of the memorable NBA finals that people remember most is the 1987 NBA Finals, the Lakers versus the Celtics, when Larry put up a 3-pointer from half court and the ball went in, it ran out, and it ricocheted with only 3 seconds left. And had that shot went in, Larry would have had 4 NBA championships, and Magic would be the one with 3 NBA championships. And he looks at head coach Pat Riley at that time, and he says, "Coach, how could you leave me this wide open to make a shot like that?" Smiling arrogantly, as Larry Legend known to be an individual that's not afraid to speak his mind. And that showed that had that shot went in, we would have been looking at a different story, a different scrapbook. He gets inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame, the NBA Hall of Fame, gets his jersey retired, and then what do we see him do? We see him become head coach of the Indiana Pacers, and then he later becomes general manager of the Indiana Pacers, and he's like doing this job for like another 20 years or something. And of course, he stepped down as general manager, but he's still a part of the organization of the Indiana Pacers. And let's not forget that headed into the 90s, he would mentor Reggie Miller. And he would actually tell Reggie Miller how to play against Michael Jordan. Remember that basketball game that I talked about when I did my other video? Ray Allen versus Reggie Miller. Remember that basketball game where I said it rimmed out and Michael had that mad look? Yeah, because Larry Bird told Reggie Miller, if you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day for 7 months and you scored 3,000 shots in an empty gym by yourself at 4 o'clock in the morning, you can beat Michael Jordan. And that's what Reggie Miller did. He took Larry Bird's advice. He got up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day and shot 3,000 shots in an empty gym. Reggie Miller was the first to come to the gym, the last one to leave the gym, and that's how he was able to tie up a series with Michael Jordan. So, Larry Bird's got a major influence. And if it wasn't for Larry Bird, we wouldn't be seeing basketball players like Dirk Nowitzki, Peja Stojakovic. We would have never seen players like Steve Nash come into the NBA at different shapes and sizes and do pretty much the same exact thing we see Larry Bird do. Now, headed into the 1996 NBA draft, we get a guard who actually played professional soccer. I know you might find this hard to believe, but before Steve Nash was playing professional basketball, he was on a European soccer tour where he was going to become a professional soccer player in Africa instead of playing basketball. But he was playing 2 sports at the same exact time, and he got drafted to the Phoenix Suns, where Charles Barkley was on this team. They had traded Charles Barkley to make room for Steve Nash, and at that time they had Jason Kidd on. Jason Kidd was going to come to this team, and they didn't want a young up-and-coming player to ruin their chances of getting Jason Kidd, so they traded him to the Dallas Mavericks some 5 seasons later, and that's where the legend of Steve Nash began. Steve Nash ended up being like the Dallas Mavericks version of Larry Bird. The guy could hit 3-pointers from half court. Didn't matter if it was on the top of the key, the right side of the court, the left side of the court. In fact, he would sometimes get between 3 or 4 giant-ass men and lay the damn ball in. And you're looking at the Steve Nash that's like 5'6", 5'5.5", weighed 165 to 175 pounds, and you're like, these guys are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. If they get a chance to let the block your shot, you can fall down, and if they trip and fall, they can land on top of you. And Steve Nash was so damn fast that you got to call him the road runner, because as soon as Steve Nash got the ball, it was hard to guard him, it was hard to stop him. In fact, he would put up shots and sequences that had you scratching your head. And some of his best games were against the San Antonio Spurs, the Houston Rockets. He would go up against teams like the Sacramento Kings, the Lakers, the Memphis Grizzlies. Those were some good matchups. But to me, his best breakout performance is when Dallas decided to trade him back to the Phoenix Suns. And at that time, we had a nice squad. We had Jason Richardson. We had Steve Nash. We had Amir Stoudemire. Yeah, he was on the Phoenix Suns at once upon a time. We had Sean Marion. He was on there once upon a time. And that team was a force to be reckoned with. They won basketball games. They beat teams. They would become a threat to the San Antonio Spurs. That's right. They would play against San Antonio. Every time they made it to the first round, they would beat someone like the Memphis Grizzlies. And then the second round, they would face San Antonio or the Dallas Mavericks. And they would usually get eliminated from playoff contingency either by San Antonio or by the Dallas Mavericks. But at this point in time in history, Steve Nash had became a back-to-back NBA MVP when we got to the 2006, when we got to the 2005-2006 NBA season. At that point, he had eliminated the Los Angeles Lakers 2 years in a row in the first round. At that time, they had acquired Tim Thomas to the Phoenix Suns, and they had eliminated them. And then 2007, he was supposed to be the NBA MVP, but who did they give it to? Dirk Nowitzki. And of course, a lot of people felt that he was robbed, but with the class that Steve Nash had, he never took it personal that he didn't become a 3-time NBA MVP. He understood he won it twice, 2 years in a row. Somebody else could win it. You know, Dirk was supposed to go on and, you know, he got eliminated in the first round of the Golden State Warriors when Baron Davis was on the team. And Montel Ellis was on that team. And he lost to the Spurs. And finally, after like 12 years into his NBA career, they got Shaq, which at this point, Steve Nash was like 34, going on 35 years of age. They had an agent, Shaquille O'Neal, and he would get traded again to the Los Angeles Lakers. And this would be like the last time we would see flashes of what Steve Nash once was. He had a back injury, just like Larry Bird. He hurt his back. And you could see that age finally caught up to Steve Nash. All those three-point shots that he was making in the first 10 years of his career, you were seeing them less and less and less. You know, he was moving slower. He had trouble walking up the court. He couldn't run to the right side or the left side of the court. There were days where he missed games. And then it would be 20 games later, he would come back, score 15, 20 points, look good for a game. And then 3 games later, he scored like 5 or 10 points. And then he had that one game where the Lakers won 5 in a row where he dropped 40 points. And it sounded like that people thought, oh shit, the old Steve Nash is back. But you know how they say, as when you light a candle, the fire of the candle is bright and hot, but then its candle will burn out? Well, Steve Nash at the end of his career was a candle. He would show flashes of what he once was, and then like a candle with a flame, it burned out. He got hurt the very second year, and I think his second year, he missed most of the NBA season, and when they was going to wonder if he was going to come back for a third season, he finally decided to retire because he just couldn't get, like, he got back surgery, but he felt that he wouldn't come back in time for a third season. That kind of, you know, upset at Kobe, because Kobe needed someone that can play with him on defense and offense, and Steve Nash could do it at that age. And we saw the closing. Now, like Reggie Miller, a lot of people feel bad for Steve Nash because this was a guy that could have gone to the NBA Finals at least once in his basketball career. At least one time it could have happened. Like, had he never got traded from the Dallas Mavericks, that sometimes make you wonder, you play 10 years with the Dallas Mavericks, you get traded and go back to the Phoenix Suns,